Okay, good morning. Today's daf is daf Mem Gimel. We are on the last word of the first line of Mem Gimel Amid Aleph. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Here we go. Yesterday we saw that a brisa from the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael mentioned 18 categories of treifas. So as we pick up at the end of the first line on Mem Gimel Amid Aleph, the Gemara now offers an alternative, a different approach that involves 8 categories. So let's see what they say. So Amar Ula. Ula says the following: Chet or Shmona, Mine Trefos Namrulo Lamoshe Besinai. There are 8 different kinds of trefos. So this is going to aggregate some of the trefos that we've mentioned. And we mentioned one category of groupings in connection with the 18. We identified that every nikuva or puncture was all part of one group. That was how we ended up adding effectively 9 different new treifas to our 18 categories that were mentioned in our Mishnah, and we still ended up with 18. So here are the 8 categories that Ula offers. Nikuva, that's when it's got a puncture. Psuka, it's got a separation, some kind of division, severing of it, of the item. Netula, it's removed. Chasura, it's missing. Karua, it's torn. Drusa, udrusa, it's trampled or clawed. Nefula, it fell. Ushvura, it's broken. So la puke la kusa de rakish bar papa. And what does that end up? This list of 8 exclude that would not be a treifa. It's the category that Rakish bar papa mentioned, where you have some kind of lung disease or kidney disease, excuse me, that is affecting the animal. That even though so it's not one of these different 8 categories, and even though maybe it will die within the year, that is not considered a treifa according to Ula's categorization. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Chia bar Rav, the Masoras Hashas changes the Rava to Rav. Chet treifot yesh ben nikuva. There are 8 different treifot that are categorized within the category of having a hole, being punctured. So v'im tomar tesha. Oh, 1 second, you'll say, let's go back and count, and you'll find that if you actually count from our Mishnah and all the ones that we've added, there are actually 9. Well, not yes, there are 9, but Mara, the gallbladder, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Katani, La. That was taught by Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, and that is not going to be the one that I'm going to include. Tanya, because we have a brisa, Nikva Hakeva, Nikvu Hadakim, Trefa. If you've got a hole in the Abu Masam or in, which is the stomach number 3, I believe. I'm just trying to still try and remember all these pieces of the no, Abu Mazim is the stomach number 4, excuse me. Stomach number 4. If you had a hole in there or in the intestines, so then that's going to be that's going to be a treifa. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, as we just said, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda adds af nikva hamara. Also, if the gallbladder has a puncture, so then that's also going to be included. And Chia Bar Rav is saying, listen, I don't include that one, and so that's how come I only have 8. Hilchos Chaver Kazayas. So this is a parenthetical that's going to be an indication of the 5 different topics that we're going to discuss. We're going to have 5 statements of Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yosef, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and they're going to address Hilchos Chaver Kazayas Mara V'Kurkavan Siman. Those are the 5 topics. So let's take a look. So what is the Hilchos? Hilchos 1. So B'Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan. My hedru le chavrei le Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. What did the friends of Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, respond to him when he said that you needed to add the gallbladder? So they said, listen, there's a pasuk in Eov, Yishpoch la'aretz merei rasi, that he pours forth my bitterness, but here we're noting the fact that Marar is also, or Mara is the word for gallbladder, and so we're going to say that that Eov is saying that his gallbladder has fallen to the ground. Dayan Eov kayam, and even despite that, Eov is able to live. So Amar Lahem, so Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, said back to them, "No, ein maskirin ma'asin nisim. You can't bring a proof from a miracle. The fact that Eov was it was able to continue to live, that was because Hashem basically told the Satan that no matter what, you can't kill Eov, that you can test him, but you can't kill him. And so as a result, that the point is that his survival didn't have as much to do with the fact that one can survive if they don't have a gallbladder, but rather it's about the fact that that Hashem had said it, and so it's a miracle, and you can't bring any proof from that. Dilo temach, because if you don't say that, that same pasuk notes Yifalach kil Yosai v'lo yachmol, that he splits my kidneys and does not spare, doesn't have mercy. So mikachai, and can you live if you have a split kidney? Of course not. So Ella Nisa shiny. So as a result, the Gemara notes that a miracle is different. Diksiv Aches nafsho shmor, because God in the conversation with the Satan says, "Listen, you got to watch his life. You can't do anything to kill him." So Hachinami Nisa shiny. So here too, a miracle is different. So Rabbi Yitzchak. So that was statement number one. That was actually the Chaver statement. It's not interesting that it goes out of order, but in any event, Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yochanan. Now we get the halacha statement. Halacha kedivrei haomer kazayas. The halacha is like the opinion that says that it's a kazayas. Well, what in the world does that mean that it's a kazayas? So. You know what? There's an interesting Rashi on one of the psukim from Eov. So let's take a look back before we go to the halacha ruling. Let's go back and do one Rashi that we skipped just now. So if you count from the bottom of the narrow lines in Rashi, it's 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 20, 22 lines up. So ragas nafsho shmor. This is what Hashem says to the Satan, that you can do whatever you want, but you can't kill him. So makos mavos hikahu, right? That you can't the kachnitz dava lishmor nafsho. He was the kinds of damage or hitting that the Satan was doing to Eov were mortal wounds, and yet he was told that you can't, that he was commanded that he should not let him die. Hashutafin, as we see in Perek Shutfin, Basra Dafnun Tet Zayin Amud Aleph, Gadol Tsaro Shel Satan. The Gemara notes that the pain of the Satan, the difficulty, the anguish of the Satan was greater, Mishal Eov, than Eov's anguish. Why? Mashal, because it's because what God effectively told the Satan to do is la'omer la'avdo. It's like he's saying to your servant, Shavor chavis, break a jug, v'shmor ye not, but you can't lose a drop of the wine that's in it. So basically, he was being told you can hit Eov as hard as you'd like, but you have to make sure not to take his life. And so as a result, the Gemara understands that all of these, at least Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, understands that this is all miraculous and not that the Satan was being skillful, and the things that happened we can learn from, and therefore determine that in fact they would not be considered a treifa, but rather you can't learn it all from the things that happened to Eov because he was surviving on a miraculous basis. Okay, so now back into the Gemara, and we're now going to do the second of the statements of Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yochanan. So we're now one from the top of the daf, 3, 6, 9, 10. Get the count right. 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 lines down, middle of the line, fourth word on the line. V'amar Rebbe Yitzchak, Rebbe Yosef, Rebbe Yochanan. Halacha kedivrei Homer kazayas. The halacha is like the opinion that says that what it matters is an olive's volume. So what is that referring to? So take a look in Rashi. Rashi helps us out. Halacha kedivrei Homer kazayas. De beinan kazayas shior benito hakaved. That if in fact you're missing an aspect, you know what I think I skipped a little bit of the first statement of Rabbi Yitzchak. I just realized if we go back to immediately after the parenthetical, I think I forgot. I think I jumped over and did not read the first statement of Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak back immediately after the parenthetical. My apologies. It's just maybe I'm just tired today. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. That in fact, and this is of course why we're bringing this, is that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. So that's the halacha component. So it didn't go out of order. That should have been a warning to me that I had skipped something. So the halacha component of the mnemonic is the fact that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, namely that a puncture of the gallbladder also causes an animal to be a treifa. Then we had the second statement was the chaver. That's what the back and forth involving Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda's the people who argue with Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, would say, "Hey, what about the pasuk in Iyov?" And Rabbi Yossi would say back, "No, the pasuk in Iyov doesn't prove anything because that was a miracle." And then we had the statement of Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha kedivrei Homer kazayas, and now we're going to explain that. And the halacha is to be back into Rashi. So again, that Rashi is the next Rashi. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. Halacha divrei Omer kazayis. De be'inan kazayit shiur benito hakaved. That when it comes to the amount of the liver that is removed, you still have to have at least a kazayas left. And if you have a kazayas left, well, then that would be a situation where you would not be a treifa. But if you have less than a kazayas left, then it would be. And we'll see later on in a couple days, Daf Mem Vav and Amin Aleph, that we're going to note that there is an apparent contradiction. De Raminan Stame de Masnisin Adadi. We're going to see that there are two anonymous Mishnayot that seem to contradict one another. Dikatani Resha, because we said in our Mishnah, Elu Trephos, that here are the Trephos, and one of the Trephos is Nital Kavit. If the liver is removed. And so if the liver is removed, the implication is lo nishtayir mimena klum, that all of it has to be removed. Ha nishtayir, if anything is left, ksheira, abba gata leka kazayas. Then I would say that even if there's less than a kazayas, it's still going to be a kosher animal. V'hadar tani, and then later we're going to say, elu ksheirus, here are the kosher animals. And we're going to say nital kaviv b'nishdar mimena kazayas, that a kosher animal is one that has a kazayas left, an olive-sized volume left of its liver. So now so as a result, we have an apparent contradiction, because our Mishnah suggests that if you have any liver left, it's going to be a non-treifa. And that other Mishnah says that no, only if you have a kazayas of the liver left, it's going to be a non-treifa. Umukminan la ketanai. And we say that it's actually a machlokas tanaim. V'haka maisila mishum shmaisisa de Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan. And we're quoting this here rather than later on, because we're bringing all of these quotes of Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yosef, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so now we've done three of the statements. But now we're going to ask a question. Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. But 1 second. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? V'hamar Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam Mishnah. The halacha is like an anonymous Mishnah, and our Mishnah is anonymous. And so doesn't that mean that our Mishnah needs to, doesn't our Mishnah, fact that it's anonymous, mean that the halacha is like it? And again, our Mishnah suggests that any amount of liver being left would make the animal not a treifa. Utnan nitla kaved below nishtarim and klum. Right? We say that the Mishnah above said that if it's removed and none of it is remaining, hanishtayer kshera. But if any of it's remaining, some of it's going to be kosher. Afagav deloha b'kazayas, even though there wasn't a kazayas. So Amorai ninhu v'aliba de Rabbi Yochanan. So there are two different opinions with respect to Rabbi Yochanan. Yes, one opinion among Amoraim say that Rabbi Yochanan says that he follows every anonymous Mishnah, but another opinion says no. In this particular instance, he says that you need to have an olives volume. Okay, so now that was the third statement, and we come to the fourth of the 5 statements. So the next statement is as follows. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mara, and this, again, edit follows the Masoras Hashas. It's De Amar would seem to be a proof of something, but this is not really a proof of something. So as a result, it changes it to the Amar, and so what does it say? What did Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yosef, say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan? Mara, the gallbladder, shenikva, that has a puncture, the kaved sotamta, and then the liver itself covers the hole that was in the gallbladder. Kshera, that is going to be kosher. So even though ordinarily a hole in the gallbladder, because again, Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yosef, says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, that a puncture in the gallbladder makes the animal a treifa. So here, if it's sealed up, it's not considered a treifa. So that's an important element. And now that's the fourth of our 5 statements. And that's the one that goes along with Mara. That's the gallbladder related statement. And now the Korkavan. V'amar Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Korkavan v'kis shalo kayam kasher. If the Korkavan, Nikava Korkavan. If the Korkavan has a hole, if the Korkavan is the gizzard, that's the sort of like a special, that's like one of the stomachs of a bird, and it has a hole, but it's kishalo, the sac that is with it, that it is within, is it does not have a hole. So then it is kosher. The animal is not a treifa. Ibailahu, they asked the question, Nikavakis v'korkavan kayamai. What happens if it's the other direction? If the outer sac is the one that has the hole, and the inner sac, the gizzard, does not have a hole. So Tashma, Dam Reb Nachman, Nikav zeh below zeh kasher. As long as one doesn't have a hole, the animal is going to be kasher and not a treifa. Amar Rabba. So again, the Masoras Hashas changes this to Rabba. Shnei oros yeshlo leveshet. There are 2 layers of the esophagus. Chitzon adom, upnimi laban. The outer one is red, and the inner one is white. Nikav zeh below zeh kasher. If there's a hole in one without the other, so then the animal is kosher. So lamali lamemar chitzon adom ufnimi laban. Why did you need to tell me that one is red and one is white? After all, although the key point that presumably was just that you can't, that as long as the puncture doesn't go through and through, you're going to be fine. So The Gemara answers the Ichalef Trefa. No, it's to tell you which part of the body belongs on which side. And if there is, for some reason, some genetic defect that the inner part is the red part and the outer part is the white part, then that animal is going to be a Trefa. The Chalav Trefa, right. So Iboilahu, so they asked the question. Now, this question is actually going on both of our cases that we were just discussing. Case number one is the kiss and the korkovan, the two layers of the stomach of a bird, and the second one is in connection with the esophagus and the two layers of the esophagus for a larger animal. So the question is, Nikvu shnehem zeh shelo keneged zeh mahu. What happens if the holes are not opposite one another? So it's not a single hole that goes through and through, but rather a hole in one layer at one point and a hole in the other layer at another point. So Amar Mar Zutra Mishmei de Rav Papa Biveshet Kasher Bekur Kavan. The Masoras Hashas changes it to a trefa. So in the esophagus it's kosher, but in the gizzard, with respect to the esophagus, the two layers of the esophagus, even if the holes are not opposite one another, it's going to be a kosher animal. Whereas when it comes to the gizzard and the sac that it's in, then even if the holes are not opposite one another, that will be a trefa. Maskif lo Ravashi. Ravashi asks a question. 1 second. I would think it should be the exact opposite. Adarabba. Veshet de ochlabe ufayabe. When it comes to the veshet, the esophagus, which moves when a person eats, and when the animal eats, and when the animal bellows. And Rashi tells us what ufaya is. Take a look at the fourth line of the wide lines of Rashi, very end of the line. Ufaya be, so eket. That is how the animal calls out. Sha'af al pisha kana motzi kol. Obviously, everybody knows that the actual voice of the animal is through air going through its trachea, but efshar shelo yehei habeshet mispashet imo. But the trachea is effectively connected to the veshet, to the esophagus, and so as a result, when one contracts and the other one contracts, and when one stretches, the other one stretches, and so as a result, V'ani shamati, and Rashi then continues, and I've heard paya mina shemes, right? Really, actually, paya doesn't have to mean that it's bellowing, that it's making a noise, but it could even just be breathing. And of course, the same principle applies. Rashi knows that the breathing isn't done through the esophagus, but rather both the esophagus and the trachea go up and down, or expand and contract with each breath. So now that we've said that, right, revach gamdale upashdale, right? So when it's going to expand and contract and stretch it out. So zimnin demahan, and because it's going to move around like that, zimnin demihandizin bahadi adodi. There'll be some times where the two holes will be right next to each other. And so as a result, that's the situation. Korkavan. But when it comes to the korkavan, demenach naya kedekai kai. But when it comes to the gizzard and its sac, it doesn't go in and out like that. It's not going to ever be such that the two holes will be opposite one another. And therefore, I think that the trefa is in the veshet case, where the whole of the inner layer and the outer layer are not opposite one another, and that would be a trefa. Whereas in the korkavan and the kiss case, then that would not be a trefa, because they are never going to be opposite one another. And you know what? Amrle Rav Acha Brei Rav Yosef Rav Ashi, Rav Acha's noted, you know what? Hacha Amrina Mishmei de Mar Zutra de Amar Mishmei de Rav Papa Kavasek. You know what? It was said exactly as you said by in the name of Mar Zutra, in the name of Rav Papa. So while we said the exact opposite by Mar Zutra in the name of Rav Papa a few moments ago, Actually, Rav Acha had a different record that suggested that, in fact, what Rav Ashi said is correct. And so, as a result, that's the way we're going to conclude on that particular point. V'amar Rabba. So we had one statement of Rabba, and now we have another statement of Rabba. Krum she'ala machmas maka beveshet eno krum. If you have a layer, a scab is the way they define it here. Krum is more general than that, but sha'ala machmas maka beveshet eno krum. If you have as a result of some kind of wound on the esophagus, that is not considered a scab. It's not considered as if it will repair the hole, and it will be a problem. Eno krum. Take a look at Rashi, 4 lines up in the bottom of Rashi. Im nikap, if there's a hole, the nistam, and now it's sealed up through this scab. Afilu asabo stima ava, even if that scab is a thick one, enum is kayemis. It's not going to last, and so as a result, that's going to be problematic. Rashi then gives another alternative explanation, but we'll leave it at that. But Amar Rabba says, third teaching of Rabba, Veshet ein lo bedika mibachutz ela mibifnim. Sorry, let me scroll down. That when it comes to checking the esophagus, it is not possible to check the esophagus from the outside. You have to check it from the inside. And we saw this previously because the inside is white, so you can see a red dot, but a red spot from, if something's wrong. But on the outside, it's all red, so it's hard to see any kind of problem. So lamai nafkamina, what difference does it make? So as we turn to Mem Gimel Amabet, l'safek drusa. Well, if you have an animal where you need to check the esophagus because maybe it was clawed, well, then you need to be able to check it. And so it means taking out the esophagus and checking it all out. And so Rashi tells us, l'safek drusa, kagona hanach de'ika lamichash luhu. Like this situation that we're going to see where we have to be worried, kidilakaman, as we are going to see shortly in about 10 days, ihu kashasik. If the animals are quiet, and now we're talking about sheep and the like, the inhu, and it, meaning the lion, that's the case that is dealt with there on Daf Nun Gimel and Bet, kamakarkaran, I'm sorry, ihu kashasik is the lion is quiet, my apologies, the lion is quiet, the inhu, and they, the sheep, kamakarkaran, are bellowing, va'amrinan, and we say about that, lekaman drusa, we have to worry that there was a clawing, sha'amru tzricha bedika, that's going to require some checking, ve'ena asura achiyadim, and it's not going to actually cause a problem unless there was a reddening of some bodily inner bodily part, keneged hachalal, that is adjacent to the body cavity. Ubisimanim, but when it comes to the pipes, we're going to see achiyadimu hasimanim atzman. It's not about a reddening opposite them, but even they themselves have to become red. Veloshin nikab, and not necessarily that they have a puncture, elashaharis, but rather it's some kind of poison that is viewed to have been in the claws of the animal, ma'adim, that will create hasiman, that will cause a reddening of either the veshet or the kanep, the esophagus or the trachea, umechalchel, and then it will penetrate the yored l'chalo, and it will go into the body cavity and thereby kill the animal. Ubeveshet, when it comes to the veshet, enu nikar hadamimut, and the redness is not apparent, elamim bifnim, unless you look from the inside, sha or lavan, where the skin is white, where the layer is white. And so as a result, that's the situation that we're talking about when we say a suffix drusa. So now that we mentioned a suffix drusa, hahi suffix drusa asai l'kamei derabba. There was a possible drusa, a possible clawed animal that came in front of Rabbah. And what did he do? Hava kabadik le Rabbah leveshet ma'abrai. He was checking the esophagus from the outside. So Amrle Abaye, his student Abaye, says to him, "V'hamarhu the Amar Beshet ein lo bedika elam bifnim." Whoa, you told us that you need to check the esophagus from the inside. So Abche Rabba Uvadke. Rabbah reversed it and checked it from the inside exactly as he was supposed to be. V'ishtakach ale trei korti dama. And in fact, he found two spots of red on it, the treifa, and he said it was a treifa. So why did Rabbah, do this? And he did it because he wanted to sharpen Abaye's thinking and make sure that he was paying attention and learning from his teacher and learning the lessons that he had been taught. And so Rashi tells us, L'chadude Abaye, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi, Kadesha Yishal, so that Abaye would ask. So the point is that sometimes as teachers, and maybe I should use this more frequently, but I think in this class we will probably not want to use that kind of technique. But in order to sharpen the minds of the students, you should occasionally make a mistake so that they understand and can learn and make sure that they're paying attention so that they catch the mistake. So so now we go back into the Gemara, and the Gemara teaches another ruling regarding a punctured esophagus. So we're going to teach another ruling for Ula. So Amar Ula, Yashav lo kotes beveshet. If there is a coats, a thorn that is in the esophagus, and it's sort of sitting there. Yashav is a language of sitting, where the translation here is lodged. We're going to see that it means more than just that the thorn has gone through the esophagus, but it's gotten stuck in the esophagus. That's the key. It's stuck in the esophagus. Ein choshishin shema hivri. We don't have to worry that maybe it got better. So what does that mean? Rashi is going to give us two interpretations. But first, let's go to Yashav lo kotes. So the next Rashi, so again, that was 12 lines down. Yashav lo kotes, kagon she'achal kotes, it ate a thorn. V'nitchav l'toch haveshet. And now it became lodged, it became stuck inside the esophagus. Ve'eno nira nikavuso mi b'chutz. But the hole that the thorn obviously made on the inside of the esophagus cannot be seen from outside the esophagus. So it's definitely not a hole through and through, which would make the animal a treifa. V'kore dam ein ba bifnim. And there is no blood that is visible on the inside either. So it's not a hole that goes all the way through even necessarily the inside. So ein choshishin, continuing on in the next Rashi, we don't worry about maybe it got better. That's usually the translation of Hevri. Shema nekav haya, that we don't say that, well, maybe there was a hole, v'hivri, and it got better, v'hava karum, and this is like a scab, sha'Allah, that is on it, machmas maka, as a result of a wound, beveshet, and that's in the esophagus, ve'ena karum, and we saw earlier that such a scab doesn't count. And so as a result, that's what we're saying. We're going to say that it's not actually a scab, and there's no scab, and as a result, there's really no hole, and it's not just a hole that was plugged up by a scab, because again, a scab is not sufficient to make kosher a hole in the esophagus. Vanishamati, and I heard, Rashi says, v'hivri. Actually, the v'hivri doesn't mean got better, but rather lashon nikav. It means that it had a hole in it. So ein choshesh shema hivri, it means that we don't worry that maybe there was a hole. So kamo, and now Rashi gives an example, because in Yechezkel it says v'barei oshen. The language of Rashi actually is a typo. It should be oten bechar votzam. That this is referring to a cutting of them in their with their sword, with your sword. So the point is that in that pasuk, bare actually means to have a hole in it and not or to cut it. And so as a result, we can say that actually the Hivri here is using that kind of language and means some kind of hole or a cut. Okay, so now we're at the parenthetical. Back into the Gemara, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. And so we now have this parenthetical noting the four questions that are going to be asked on Ula. Doras, Chatichos, Besakin, Tmeya, Siman. So what is the Doras question? Ula Ula, Maishna, Misafik Drusa. Meaning, if there's some kind of uncertainty here, why aren't we saying, well, it's an uncertain treifa. We need to be worried, and then maybe it's really a treifa, and therefore it's not kosher. That's going to be the root of our question. Ula ola maishna misafik drusa. So why is this any different from a situation for example, the lion was quiet and the animals were baying, and we say that you have to be worried that one of the animals, even though you can't see any injury, one of the animals was clawed, and therefore you need to check the stomachs in order to make sure that there was no hole in it. So why is that different? You don't have, and why don't you say that here? No, really, maybe he's not worried about a suffix drusa. He would agree that if there's nothing to indicate a problem, you don't actually have to worry about it. Okay. Well, 1 second. What about the other kind of uncertainty case where you have two pieces of meat? One is chalev, not kosher. One is shuman. One is kosher. And we say that if you ate one of them, you have to bring an asham taloi because you're not sure whether you did a sin. So obviously we are concerned about some kind of prohibition in that case. So why shouldn't we, similarly, if we were to eat this animal, have to bring an asham taloi? So hasam itchazak isura. No, that was a case where we knew for sure there was a problem. Meaning, if we didn't know that there was chalev there in the first place, well, then you wouldn't say, oh, well, maybe this meat is chalev that on your own. It's only because we knew that there was chalev there that we were saying that there was something prohibited and therefore we have to worry about it. Okay, so that's the third challenge. Well, what about the case where we say that one slaughters with a check knife and then finds a problem with the knife after engaging in the slaughter? And we say that we have to be worried that maybe the slaughter, that the knife got nicked and thereby ended up tearing instead of doing the shchita, and so therefore we have to be worried that the animal's not kosher. Hasam is yilid la reyusa besakin. We have a known defect that has definitely happened in the knife, and so as a result, that's the reason that Ula is going to say that case is different. And then the fourth and final challenge to Ula. Umayishnam is suffik tuma bershus hayachid to suffik tame. Well, 1 second. What about the well-known case that if you have an uncertain case of tuma, where you know that there was a dead body somewhere, but you're not exactly sure where, and if we say that it was in a rishus hayachid, and a person goes into that field, that person is treated as tameh, because tuma in rishus hayachid is considered tameh. Bulatamech. Ula responds, 1 second though. Well, you could just as well have said that we should compare our case to a case of uncertain tuma in a public thoroughfare. And in a public thoroughfare, we say that a suffix tuma is tahor. So why is it that in one case it's tameh, in one case it's tahor? Elahasam hilchas agamiri le misota. No, the reason is because we learn it from the halachas of sota. If you may remember this from our learning of sota together, and in variety of other contexts where we've learned this drasha before, that the following drasha is made, that a sota can only become a sota being suspected of being alone with a man that her husband has, that the wife being alone with a man that the husband has warned about. Well, that can only happen in a private location, meaning in a public location, that's not considered a loan. And so as a result, only in that situation are we worried about the woman being unfaithful. And so too, by analogy, due to the similar wording, we're going to say when it comes to tuma, we're only going to be worried about it in a case where you are in a private place and not in a public thoroughfare. So in the end, all those four challenges fall away, and so that is we're not done with Ula's ruling. Yosef Hahu Rabbanan Kamei de Rav Kahana. So there was a rabbi sitting in front of Rav Kahana, and he told over Ula's ruling. Yosef Kamar, and he sat there and he said, Nimtses Itmar, that when Ula made his statement, he was saying that the thorn was found in the esophagus. Not that it was lodged in the esophagus, that was stuck into the skin, but rather it was just found. Aval yashav chayshinan. But if it was actually lodged in it, then we would be worried that maybe the animal is a treifa. Amar lahu Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says to him, or says to all of that, to the students, Lo titzule, don't listen to him. Yashav itmar, Yashav itmar. It's not when Ula made his statement, he said Yashav, not Nimtses. And so as a result, the point is that the only time that we're not even going to be worried, even in a case where the thorn was actually embedded in the esophagus. Aval Nimtses, if it was just found there, Lo Israch le Ula, we wouldn't even need Ula to tell us. The Kula Cheve Barayasa Kotziachlan, because all wild animals eat thorns. And so as a result, that's not a proof one way or the other. Itmar, so now we're going to, new topic. The topic is going to be, again, more problems with the esophagus that make an animal a treifa. Turbatz Haveshet. If you have the wide part of the esophagus, that is the very top of the esophagus, but that wide part, Rav Amar b'mashahu, right? So in general, if there's a hole in the esophagus, it's a mashahu, any kind of hole. Rav says that also applies at the very top of the esophagus, in the wide part of the esophagus. Shmuel Amar Berubo. No, Shmuel says no. At that point of the esophagus, you actually need the severing to be a majority of the circumference. Rav Amar b'mashahu. Rav says that only a mashahu is necessary, any amount is necessary, makom shchitahu, because that is considered part of the place where one is able to slaughter the animal, and as a result, it's considered part of the veshet, part of the esophagus, and the entire esophagus. We say any of the esophagus has even a hold of a mashahu is going to be a treifa. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, no, Berubo lav makom shchitahu. In that place where it's wider, that is not you need to have rove of it, because this is not a place where the shchita can happen. So, therefore you need the majority. Berubo, you need the majority because lav makom shchitahu. That isn't the place of the slaughtering. It's got a different rule. So, hey niu turbat haveshet. What is this Turbat Haveshet? So Amar Mari Bar Mar Ukva Amar Shmuel. So it was said in the name of Shmuel, Kol Shechotcho Umarchiv Zet Hu Turbat Haveshet. Wherever one cuts the pipe of the esophagus, if the edges that where you cut it widen, that is going to be the top of the esophagus, the wide part of the esophagus. If you cut it and nothing happens, and it's sort of like the edges of it stay together, or stay at the same circumference, well, then that is going to be the main part of the esophagus. Amar lahu Rav Papi disagrees. Marlo Amar Hachi, but we didn't learn that. Umanu Rav Bibi Bar Umanu, and who is that Mar, that the teacher that said something different? That Rav Bibi Bar Abaye. It was Rav Bibi. So Ella Kol Shechotcho VeOmid Bimkomo Zed Turbat Haveshet. No, even if it stays, again, if you cut something, the question is what happens to the tube? Does the tube remain, like if you cut a metal tube, obviously the metal is just going to stay in its current form. But if you cut like a rubber tube or other kinds of materials, the hole where you make the cut could actually end up getting wider, or it could get narrower depending on the surface tension associated with the material. And so as a result, if it, according to Rav Puppy, if it stays where it is, that is also going to be considered the wide part of the esophagus, meaning the top of the esophagus. Ela ezu veshet. What? So right. Ela kol shechot v'omed b'mkomo zed torbat haveshet. Anything where it stays in its place is going to be the main, the wide part of the esophagus, the top of the esophagus. Ela ezu veshet atzmo kol shechot v'chavetz. The main part of the esophagus is where if you were to cut it, the pipes would contract a little bit, and so they would not be as wide as they were before you did the cut. So Yona Amar Zera Mivlata. So that Yona says in the name of Zera that Mivlata, when it swallows, or where it swallows. So that is considered the location of the wide part of the esophagus. V'kama, how long is that part of the esophagus? Amar of Avia pachot nisarta v'adiv mechitasa. It's smaller than a grain of barley, but it's larger than a grain of wheat. Hahu Torah, there was an ox, the Hava Livnei Rav Ukva, that belonged to the sons of Rav Ukva. The Adchil Bey Shchita B'Turbatz Haveshet, the Gamar Beveshet. They began the slaughter in the wide part of the esophagus, and remember, according to Rav, that is a kosher part for Shchita, but according to Shmuel, that's not a kosher part. And so it ended in the right part of the esophagus. So Amar Rava said, Ramina alei chumrei de Rav v'chumrei de Shmuel v'tarifnalei. I'm going to apply the strict aspect of Rav, meaning that it could have that even a hole of any size in the wide part of the esophagus is a problem, and I'm going to apply the strictest of Shmuel, who says that the wide part of the esophagus is not where one can engage in shchita. And so as a result, chumrei de Rav de Amar Rav Mashu. Rav says that even any amount of hole in the wide part of the esophagus is going to create a treifa. And so as a result, as soon as that part is cut, it's considered a treifa. V'Amar Rav makom shchitahu. But 1 second, you'll say that Rav says that is a kosher place of shchita, and therefore you should focus on the end of the shchita and note the fact that it was all a kosher shchita. No, kishmuel. That's where I'm going to follow the stricture of Shmuel. He says that that's not the place of shchita. Shmuel ha'amar baruba. But 1 second, if you're going to tell me about Shmuel, he says that for the cutting of a hole in the tarbutz, the wide part of the veshet, tarbutz haveshet, that for there to be a problem there, it needs to be a majority of the tarbutz haveshet, and the majority by the time you get to the majority, he's already cutting in the regular part of the veshet is the case, and so therefore that it would not be a problem, it would not be a treifa according to Shmuel. So Karav Damar B'Mashu. So on that front, I'm going to follow like Rav. So the bottom line is he's following like Rav with respect to the size of the hole that makes the animal a treifa, and he's following Shmuel with respect to the location. So Igalgo Milsa Mitoy Lekameh de Rabbi Abba. And so it all came in front of Rabbi Abba. Amar Lahu, he said to the people who told him, Torah Bein LaRav, Bein LaShmuel Shmar Shari. But 1 second, if you look at each of them individually, according to Rav, this is a kosher animal because the entire shechita was done in a kosher location. And according to Shmuel, although the start of the shechita was done in a wrong location, it never became a treifa, and therefore it also had a valid shechita, and so it also is kosher. So Zilu Amrule Lebrei de Rav Yosef Bar Chama, go tell the son of Rav Yosef Bar Chama, namely Rava, de l'shalim demei Torah lemare. He has to go pay the value of the ox to its owner. And Rashi tells us, Demei Torah, very end of the third to last line in Rashi, Lemare, Shekvar He'ekilu L'Kalavim. That he already, Rava must have already fed the animal to dogs. Dilu have a command, because if the meat of that animal was still sticking around, Hava Hadarbe, he could just retract his psak, umishtere ba'achila, and permit it to be eaten. Dekaimalan, because we have a rule that we saw back in Sanhedrin. Ta bidvar Mishnah. If somebody makes a mistake in connection with a Mishnah, choser, you can retract it, and it's not considered a psak halacha. V'had dvar Mishnah, and this is considered dvar Mishnah. Mifureshasi, it's explicit dvar Mishnah. Delo abdinan kitrei chomrei. You don't combine the stringencies of two people who each say that in the particular case it would be permitted. And so, as a result, at the moment, it appears like we are saying that Rava is wrong, but we are not done discussing Rava. We are going to come to Rava's rescue, and in fact, may even come to the conclusion that Rava is correct in his ruling. But for that, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Now, the classes for Shabbos and Sunday have already been recorded by Eli, so there's not going to be any live daf this weekend. And I'm planning to record the daf for Monday, God willing, in advance of Monday, but most likely it will not go out until Monday because Shabbos and Sunday are weekend, and so we don't have people working in the office. And I don't have access to the recording, so I'm not able to send them out myself. So I will get them posted as soon as possible, God willing, sometime Monday morning, though the recording for Monday will be posted. I will be teaching. It was originally planned that I was not going to be here. I'm going on vacation next week, but I will teach anyway on Tuesday and Wednesday in person and on Zoom. But from June 18th through June 25th, except for the weekend will, of course, be Eli. But the weekdays from Thursday, June 18th through Thursday, June 25th. Please keep an eye out on the WhatsApp for details as to how we'll be learning. We're still trying to find somebody to teach during those days. We may end up having to circulate recordings, but if we do that, we will certainly let you all know. So, God willing, I will be back on possibly the 25th. But at the but God willing, certainly on Friday the 26th. So I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos and looking forward to continuing our learning together.
Good Shabbos.